What if one of Australia's greatest cities was born not out of ambition, but out of punishment? The story of Brisbane's founding begins with lost castaways, harsh penal settlements, and a river almost missed by some of history's most famous explorers. From the first European encounters with Moreton Bay to the brutal realities of the convict colony, Brisbane's early years reveal a struggle for survival, authority, and control. This is the remarkable story of how a place once feared as an outpost of exile became the thriving heart of Queensland. Brisbane history. Founding of Brisbane and the Moreton Bay Penal Settlement. The story of Brisbane's founding begins in 1825, when the Moreton Bay Penal Settlement was established as a place of exile and punishment for convicts who reoffended after arriving in New South Wales. This remote location was chosen to isolate the most troublesome prisoners and enforce harsh discipline, reflecting Britain's determination to strengthen transportation as a deterrent. Early discovery of the Brisbane River. The credit for locating the Brisbane River and identifying the future site of the town goes to several individuals, including 3 ex-convicts. However, Surveyor General John Oxley played a defining role. On December 5, 1823, Oxley recorded his excitement at the discovery of the river, writing that it promised the most beneficial consequences for the colony should a settlement be formed along its banks. Restoring the fear of transportation. By the early 1800s, British officials feared that transportation to New South Wales was losing its intended sting. Many convicts were finding success in the colonies, especially under Governor Lachlan Macquarie, 1810 to 1821. Word spread back to Britain that life after transportation could be prosperous, which undermined its value as punishment. Earl Bathurst, the colonial secretary, raised concerns in 1817, arguing that transportation must remain an object of real terror to all classes of the community. To address this, he appointed John Thomas Biggar, a former Chief Justice of Trinidad, to investigate the system. The Biggar Report and its impact. Between 1822 and 1823, Biggar released reports recommending much harsher conditions. Among his proposals was the creation of new, remote penal settlements where repeat offenders would face severe treatment designed to restore terror to the idea of transportation. Governor Brisbane and the Moreton Bay Settlement. Acting on Biggar's advice, Governor Thomas Brisbane directed John Oxley in 1823 to explore Moreton Bay as a potential site. The area's isolation from Sydney and other European settlements made it ideal for confining the worst convicts. This decision set the stage for the founding of Brisbane in 1825, marking the beginning of a city that grew from a place of punishment into one of Australia's most dynamic urban centres. Brisbane history. Founding of Brisbane, Cook, Flinders, and the move to the river. Early explorers, Cook and Flinders. The story of Brisbane's history begins long before the penal settlement. In 1770, James Cook sailed past Moreton Bay, naming it in honour of the Earl of Moreton, a former president of the Royal Society. Nearly 3 decades later, in 1799, Matthew Flinders explored the bay more closely. He spent 15 days charting the waters and even landed at Red Cliff Point, today's Redcliffe. Yet, despite their efforts, neither explorer discovered the great river that flowed into the bay. Castaways discover the Brisbane River. It wasn't until 1823 that Europeans first encountered the river, and by accident. 4 men, Thomas Pamphlet, John Finnegan, Richard Parsons, and John Thompson, were cast adrift when their boat was blown off course near Sydney. Thompson did not survive, but the others eventually washed ashore on Moreton Island, mistakenly believing they had landed south of Jervis Bay. The local First Nations people of Moreton Bay came to their aid, providing food, water, and guidance. With their help, the survivors set out across the mainland. In June 1823, they stumbled upon a wide river and followed it upstream. This was the first recorded European encounter with what the Turrbal people called Maiwar, now known as the Brisbane River. John Oxley's exploration. Later that year, Surveyor General John Oxley arrived in the region aboard HMS Mermaid. On November 29, 1823, he found Pamphlet and Finnegan on Bribie Island and learned of the river they had discovered. Guided by Finnegan, Oxley set out on December 1 to explore it himself. Over 4 days, his party traced the river's course for nearly 80 kilometers. Oxley named it the Brisbane River after Governor Thomas Brisbane, recognizing both its importance and its potential as a settlement site. Redcliffe Settlement and the move inland. On September 12, 1824, the vessel Amity arrived at Redcliffe Point with 54 passengers, including John Oxley, Lieutenant Henry Miller of the 40th Regiment, appointed as the first commandant, botanist Alan Cunningham, a military guard, and about 30 convicts. Redcliffe, however, proved unsuitable. Poor soil, lack of fresh water, and difficult conditions made it impractical for long-term settlement. Within months, officials decided to relocate inland to the banks of the Brisbane River, where the Penal settlement, and ultimately the modern city of Brisbane, would take root. Brisbane history, founding of Brisbane, the Penal settlement and the birth of a town. Choosing the site for Brisbane town. When Surveyor General John Oxley first explored the Brisbane River, he recommended 2 possible settlement sites, one near present-day Breakfast Creek and another around Milton. Yet, no immediate action was taken to establish a town in either location. In May 1825, Commandant Henry Miller and pilot John Gray made the decision themselves. They selected a site a few bends up the river from Breakfast Creek, a place known to the local Turrbal people as Meanjin. No official record explains why Miller chose this spot, nor the exact date Brisbane town was founded, but this decision laid the foundation for what would become Queensland's capital. Life in the Moreton Bay Penal Settlement. By 1826, the new settlement housed around 200 convicts. At first, Brisbane was little more than a rough encampment with slab and timber huts. That began to change under the leadership of Captain Patrick Logan, who became commandant in March 1826. Logan introduced a program of public works, replacing makeshift buildings with stone structures. One of the most enduring constructions was the windmill on Spring Hill, built around 1828. It served not only to grind corn and wheat, but also as a treadmill for punishing convicts, a symbol of the harsh discipline Logan was infamous for enforcing. Conditions were brutally severe. Convicts labored from dawn to sunset, often in leg irons. Punishments included up to 150 lashes or grueling shifts on the treadmill that could last up to 14 hours. Following the recommendations of the bigger reports, Moreton Bay became one of the harshest penal settlements in Australia. Expansion and the push for free settlement. While Brisbane remained a place of punishment, explorers were already eyeing the fertile lands beyond. In 1827, Alan Cunningham became the first European to reach the Darling Downs, west of Brisbane. Yet, despite interest, official restrictions prevented free settlers from moving into the Moreton Bay district. No one was allowed within 80 kilometres of Brisbane without government approval, effectively stalling agricultural and commercial development. By the 1830s, pressure mounted. Farmers, merchants, and entrepreneurs from southern colonies lobbied the government to open Moreton Bay to free settlement. Meanwhile, the cost of maintaining the penal colony was proving unsustainable. Reports in 1832 and 1835 recommended shutting it down. Convict numbers began to decline from 1837, and by 1839 surveyors were mapping the district for future settlement. Finally, on February 10, 1842, the Moreton Bay Penal Settlement was formally abolished. This paved the way for free settlers, and just over a decade later, in 1859, Queensland was declared a separate colony with Brisbane as its capital. Brisbane's journey from a remote penal outpost to a thriving capital city is a story of exploration, survival, and transformation. What began as a place of exile grew into the heart of a colony and one of Australia's most vibrant cities. If you enjoyed learning about Brisbane history, founding of Brisbane, make sure to like this video, subscribe to History Love, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story from the past. Share this video with friends who love history, and let us know in the comments what moment in Brisbane's history fascinates you most. History Love is your go-to YouTube channel for exploring the fascinating stories of the past.